Alright, I had to take a little break there. Let's continue on with the second premise, that all human ethical claims are equal or equally significant or should be analyzed in a equivalent way. I'm not sure I like the phrasing of this yet. Maybe someone out there who's smarter than me can figure out a better way to phrase this. But essentially my meaning for this is to say that I would like to deny the premise or the possibility of there being different categories of persons. I would like to deny the fact that there could be a certain kind of person for whom it is ethical to do something like to take other people's property, but for another kind of person, that's not ethical. So, I'm already getting into the denial of it, but let's go into what would happen if we deny the second premise, that all human ethical claims should be considered equally or analyzed equally, or that all human ethical claims are equal. One thing it doesn't mean, actually, before I continue, is it doesn't mean that each particular claim is equal on its face, if that makes sense. In other words, person A and person B, if person A has an ethical claim on B, saying that B has violated A's ethical claim, and it's a fairly significant issue, attempted murder or something, and that, but B has ethical claim on A, on a fairly, minor ethical issue, say something like, really super minuscule petty theft of some sort. Well, the two claims, while each person's claim is equal to, each person is equal to the other in that they make the claim, but not that any particular claim X is equal to another claim Y. Does that make sense? So, what I'm saying is that it's not that all claims of an ethical nature are equal or equivalent. Because I think that we can, that's pretty, I think obviously most people would agree with that. That's not the case. However, that each person in their own personhood, I think I like that, in their own personhood have, an equivalent claim or call for having, their ethical situation treated equally. So, all right. Since now I've made it utterly confusing, let's go to the denial. And maybe by looking at the denial, it'll make more sense what I'm trying to actually say. So, we'll deny that all human ethical claims should be considered equally or treated equivalently. Well, if we deny this, then we have the possibility, now it's not a necessity, but we certainly have the possibility for someone to make a claim that there are different kinds of persons. That there is a super person and or a subclass of persons. Such that if you look at the ethics of slavery, well, in the ethic of slavery you have to assume that there are super persons and or sub-persons, such that the sub-person's ethical claims are irrelevant when considered or contrasted with the super person's ethical claims. So the slave cannot say to his master, you have violated my rights, because the master will say, well, your ethical claim is not relevant to, me, because I am the master, the super person, and you are the slave, the sub person. And I think most people would deny that slavery has a legitimate ethical basis or foundation. So therefore, denying this idea that all human ethical claims should be analyzed equally, or that all have equivalent claim or status of claim, I don't think this is going to, in a crazy weird place. It's basically just saying that from the very beginning of the analysis, we can't assume that anyone's claims are irrelevant to another person's. That each person has an equal or equivalent chance to make a claim upon another in terms of a rights violation or in terms of an ethics violation. Alright, now the third premise, that private property is possible if not actual. And I think this is the one which is probably, if you were looking at it in controversy, I don't think it's particularly controversial. I think most people wouldn't think it's controversial. But when you really get down to the philosophical analysis, I think this is the one where most people might have, there might be the most contention, even though it's still fairly insignificant. Not that the philosophical contention is insignificant, but the number of people advocating a denial of private property would probably be, fairly small. So, let's deny this possibility. Let's say that private property is not possible. Now, I think in the first analysis, let's get away from some of the syndicalist analysis, but I think in a very common analysis of a denial of private property, I'm not sure if it becomes possible for anyone to take anything that they find in nature and to acquire it to their person to the exclusion of anyone else. So I guess what I'm saying is, if I am a person in nature, I'm on a deserted island, and I find a coconut or a pineapple, and I determine to myself to eat it, I don't know if I can eat it, because if philosophically there is no private property and no possibility for such, how could I acquire unto myself, to the exclusion of anyone else, this particular thing? Or let's make the the argument a little bit greater, or a little more sophisticated in terms of, let's say, the deserted island makes this issue seem so much clearer because you don't have these conflicting rights between people in the locality of the situation, right? So, how could I own, this particular hat that's on my head if there is no private property? If someone stole my hat, if there is no private property on, there's really no basis for me to say, well, my hat was stolen, because the whole possessive my there would be inaccurate. There is no such thing as my hat, because there is no personal private property. And so I think, I just personally, I guess I'm not going to get into, I don't want to get into a conversation with people about whether private property is possible. I think that it's a very good conversation to have, but I don't want to go there for this project. Maybe I'll definitely go into that later. It's definitely a question that I'm interested in, and that I have a lot of interest in, but it gets into some very deep issues. So suffice it to say, I'll leave it there. Let's say that when you deny private property, you have a lot of issues that pop up that suddenly a lot of people don't like and would find unsatisfactory right at the face. Now, I mentioned the syndicalist analysis, which I'm really just beginning to dip my fingers into. They make a demarcation or a distinction between property and possessions, such that I think for this, again, I'm still learning about this, but that the syndicalist says that the hat on my head is my possession. I am currently possessing it. However, the house I left before I went on this walk is not my possession, because I am not possessing it right now. Right now it stands alone, and that I am not entitled to property that I'm not possessing. For them, this clears up a lot of. They feel that this clears up a lot of ethical issues in terms of, they would say is capitalist exploitation, right? So the fact that someone can profit from the increase of production which they have not labored on, and they have an issue with that. And I think this is a fascinating topic. But still, even within their analysis, they still have property, because it's obvious that people must have property to exist, right? If we can't even eat, because to eat is to acquire property to the exclusion of all others, then we all die. So it kind of is it would be, I would think most people would consider it a fairly ridiculous ethic that said a rational being has no right to exist because of ethics. I mean, I suppose there is logical room to make that argument, and I don't see that it's actually an internal contradiction, but certainly if we are going to be not hypocritical and consistent, then we would stop eating as soon as we accepted such a premise. So we'll just let's reject that one, all right, for now, rather than getting into all the sticky issues relating to the philosophical analysis of property.